Texas Hill Country. May 1877, Flint Talbot had just finished hauling the last bale of hay into the loft when he heard a creak from the far end of the barn, the kind of sound that did not belong to wind or livestock. He froze, pitchfork still in hand. Another creak. Then a whisper. Then a muffled giggle. Flint stepped forward, boots quiet on the hay-strewn floor. He moved past the horse stalls, eyes narrowing toward the shadows near the feed sacks. A small foot poked out from behind a stack of crates. "You best come out," Flint said, voice calm but firm. "I will not hurt you. But I do not take kindly to trespassers." There was a pause, then a slight shuffling. A small boy stepped out. His face was smudged, his hair sticking up in all directions, and he looked no older than 6. Behind him, 3 more children appeared, 2 girls, one no more than a toddler and another boy around 9, standing as if he was trying to shield the others. Flint lowered the pitchfork slowly. "Well, I will be." The older boy squared his shoulders. "We ain't stealing. We just needed a place to sleep. Mama said it was safe here." "Mama," Flint repeated. "She said she would come back," the boy added, voice tight, like he was trying hard not to cry. Flint looked at the 4 of them, clothes dusty, faces tired, eyes wild with fear. He crouched down, not too close. "What are your names?" the boy swallowed. "I'm Owen. That's Olivia, she's 7, that's Otis, he's 6, and the baby's Opal, she is 2. "How long you been here?" "Since last night," Owen said. "Mama went to get help." Flint stood, jaw tight. "This is my land, my barn." "You're lucky I found you instead of someone else." He paused. "Where's your mother?" Owen looked down. "She was running. From a man who tried to marry her. She did not want him. She said we had to go." Flint's brow furrowed. "Running from a man," Olivia nodded. "She left her dress behind." "The white one." Flint exhaled slowly. He had heard stories, but they were rare. A woman running from her own wedding. With 4 children. Just then, the barn doors creaked open. She stepped into the light like someone walking out of a storm. Her blue dress was torn at the hem, her dark hair half fallen from its pins, and her boots caked with mud. Her eyes met Flint's, wide with panic, then relief. I came back. I came," she rushed forward, gathering the toddler into her arms as the other children clung to her skirt. "Ma," Owen whispered, burying his face against her side. She looked up at Flint, breathing hard. "I am sorry, I had nowhere else to go." Flint studied her. She was maybe 28, strong-built, with sunburned cheeks and scraped knuckles. No ring on her hand, no man behind her. "You their mother?" "Yes," she said. "My name is Calla Hart. Please, do not send us away." Flint looked down at the children, then back at her. There was something honest in her face, something raw, not just desperation, determination. "What were you running from?" he asked. Calla held Opal tighter. "A man named Vernon Baird. He is rich, ambitious. My father arranged the marriage to pay off his debts. I said no. They tried to force me into the dress. I ran before I made it to the church." Flint nodded slowly. "So you are a runaway bride." Calla's jaw trembled, but she lifted her chin. "I would rather be a runaway than a prisoner." He looked at her for a long moment. "You picked a hell of a barn to hide in." "It was the first one I saw after we crossed the creek," she said quickly. "I swear I was going to ask for help this morning. I just needed to make sure it was safe." Flint exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. Then he turned and nodded toward the house across the yard. "Get them inside," he said. "They all look half-starved. I will make coffee. You can tell me the rest once they are fed." Calla hesitated, eyes narrowing with caution. "Why are you helping us?" Flint met her stare. "Because no one should be left in a barn with 4 hungry children and no place to go. And because you had the guts to run." Calla blinked, and for the first time her shoulders sagged with something like relief. Inside, while the children devoured cornbread and drank warm milk, Calla sat at the edge of the kitchen bench. Flint poured her coffee and slid it across the table. "You got family?" he asked. "No one left who would help me," she said. "My mother passed 6 years ago. My father. He stopped being a father the day he sold me off." Flint leaned back, arms crossed. "What were you planning to do if I turned you out?" "I would have kept walking," she said. "Until I found a town where no one knew me. I would have worked, sewn dresses, scrubbed floors, anything." He nodded slowly. "You got grit, I will give you that." Calla met his eyes, uncertain. "I do not want charity." "This ain't charity," Flint said. "This is me not letting a mother and 4 kids sleep in the dirt." She looked down at her coffee, fingers trembling as she held the cup. "Thank you." He stood, letting the silence stretch a while. Then he said, "You can stay here for a few days. Until you figure out what comes next." Calla looked up, something shifting in her eyes. "Why?" Flint shrugged. "Maybe I am just tired of eating alone." That night, Flint sat on the porch, watching the stars blink through the clouds. The children were asleep inside, curled together like pups. He heard Calla's steps before he saw her. She lowered herself onto the top step beside him, pulling the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I do not know what I would have done if you refused," she said quietly. "I did not." She looked at him, then really looked. "You live out here alone, most days," he said. "Had a brother once. He joined the Rangers, never came back. Parents passed a long time ago." Calla nodded slowly. "So you know what it is like, losing things." "I do." They sat in silence for a stretch. Then Calla said, "I thought I was going to die out there. I have not slept in 2 nights, and I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find he found us." Flint's voice was low. "You are safe here. I will make sure of it." She looked at him again, longer this time. "You do not even know me." "I do not need to." And for the first time in a long while, Calla smiled. Not wide, not easy, but real. Inside, the fire crackled. Outside, the wind shifted. Flint felt something settle in him he had not felt in years. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, there was warmth and quiet, and the weight of another person's trust resting gently beside him. And that was enough for now. Calla stood at the edge of the vegetable patch, a hoe in her hand, sleeves rolled past her elbows. The morning sun hadn't yet crested the ridge in full, but the air already clung warm against her skin. Flint had gone out with the wagon to check fence lines and bring back seed from the neighboring homestead. Before he left, he showed her where the well was, where the feed sat, and how to keep the chickens from slipping through the back gap in the fence. Now, with the children still asleep and the house quiet, she worked the soil in steady rows, the rhythm of it giving her something to hold on to. She didn't notice Flint's return until she heard the creak of the wagon wheels and the soft thud of boots near the fence line. She straightened, brushing her palms on her skirt as he approached, a burlap sack slung over his shoulder. "You're up early," he said, setting the sack down near the porch. "I couldn't sleep past dawn," she said. "Used to waking before the sun." He nodded, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "You know your way around a hoe." "I kept my own garden in Mason," she said, glancing toward the rows. "We didn't have much coin, so I learned quick what grew fast and filled bellies." He looked toward the neat furrows she'd already done. "You did more in an hour than I've done all spring." She gave a slight shrug and stepped back as he knelt to untie the sack. "I brought seed, corn, beans, some squash, picked them up from the Caldwells. They trade fair and they don't ask questions." Calla crouched beside him, fingers brushing over the paper packets. "You think it's safe for me to be seen?" "I told them you were kin," he said. "Cousin's widow. Come to help with the place." She met his eyes. "That's a lie that'll wear thin soon enough." "Maybe," he said, "but it buys time, and time's what you need." She pulled a packet of pole beans free and studied the label. "You've done this kind of thing before." "Covered for someone?" "No," he said, tying off the empty sack, "but I know what it's like to want a clean break." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I appreciate it, more than I know how to say." "You don't have to say it." He rose beside her, brushing his palms together. "Just plant him straight. I don't want crooked rows." She gave him a look. "Only thing crooked about this patch is the fence." Flint gave a low chuckle, and for a breath, the weight between them eased. By the time afternoon settled over the ridge, the children had spilled out of the house, muddying their hands and chasing the hens around the coop. Flint watched them from the porch, boot propped on the step. Calla stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes following Opal's unsteady toddle. "She's always climbing," she said, "even before she could walk." "She's got no fear," Flint said. "None of them do, not until something teaches it to them." He looked at her then, long and steady. "What taught you?" She didn't answer right away. "My father started drinking after my mother died. He lost the land inside 6 months. After that, I learned not to wait for someone to come save me." Flint didn't speak. He just nodded once, slow. Calla turned her gaze toward the horizon. "You said your brother joined the Rangers. You ever think of going with him?" "I did once," Flint said. "But I had the stock to tend, and someone had to stay and bury the old man when the fever took him." "You stayed behind out of duty." "I stayed because I couldn't stomach leaving the land to rot," he said. "The hills keep me steady, even when nothing else does." Calla looked down at her hands. "What keeps a man like you from marrying?" He gave a short breath. "Tried once. She figured I was too quiet. Said she wanted a man who could fill a room." "Some rooms don't need filling," Calla said, voice soft. "Some just need someone willing to stay." He didn't answer that, but his posture shifted just enough to suggest her words had landed somewhere deep. That evening, while the children curled into quilts on the floor and the kitchen fire burned low, Flint pulled a small tin from the shelf above the hearth and set it on the table. Calla raised a brow. "What's that?" "Blackberry preserves. I set 'em up last summer. For winter. For when something calls for sweetness." She sat slowly and took the spoon he offered. The preserves were thick, dark, and tart around the edges. She closed her eyes just for a second as the taste hit her tongue. "I haven't had anything like that since last harvest," she said. "There'll be more this year," he said, "if you're still here come late August." She met his gaze open, steady. "That depend on you." "No," he said. "That depends on whether you want to stay." She didn't speak for a long time. Then her fingers curled around the spoon again. "I think I might." He stood, collecting the tin. She watched him, the way he moved like he'd lived so long in silence. He didn't know how to fill it with anything but work. As he turned toward the sink, she said, "If I do stay, I won't be a burden." Flint looked over his shoulder. "I never said you were." She smiled, not out of relief, but something quieter. Trust, forming slow as creek water in spring. Outside, the sky darkened to a deep indigo and the sound of night insects rose. Inside, the warmth held. And for the first time in a long stretch of days, no one reached for the door. The rain started mid-morning, a slow tapping against the tin roof that built into a steady hush. Flint leaned against the doorframe of the barn, arms folded, watching the drops gather along the eaves. The children were inside, settled around a game of stones and chalk on the floor. Calla stood at the work table, mending a torn sleeve with a quiet focus that reminded him of the way water carves stone, patient, exact, and without apology. He didn't speak right away, didn't want to break the calm they'd managed these last few days. But she must have felt his eyes because she looked up, needle paused mid-stitch. "You need something?" He stepped in, boots leaving faint prints on the packed dirt. "I was thinking about that old smokehouse." She set the needle down. "The one behind the hog pen might be worth fixing up. Could hang meat there again, keep the larder steadier come fall." She brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. You'd need hickory. There's none close. There's a grove east of the ridge. I can haul a load before the creek rises. Calla watched him for a beat. You always prepare that far ahead. I've seen enough winters to know what happens when you don't. She picked the needle back up. My mother used to say the land remembers who tends it. She sounds like the kind of woman who didn't waste words. She wasn't soft, Calla said, but she taught me how to boil down marrow and patch a roof before I ever learned to read. Flint tilted his head. You can read. Well enough, she said. Taught myself from a weathered Bible and a Sears catalog. I used to sneak into the schoolhouse when the teacher left, copied alphabets onto scraps of feed sack. That's more learning than most get. I wanted to write letters, she said quietly. Not to send, just to feel like I could say something and have it stay put. He leaned against the table's edge, gaze steady. You write now, not in a while. You could start again. There's paper in the desk drawer. Ink too. Calla didn't answer right away, but her fingers slowed on the stitch. Maybe. Flint straightened. I'll check the north fence before the rain deepens. If it holds, I'll start clearing that grove. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on him longer than necessary. By the time he returned, soaked through and trailing wood chips in his wake, the house was filled with the scent of rosemary and simmering onions. Calla stood over the hearth, stirring a pot with one hand while balancing Opal on her hip. The little girl's cheek rested against her mother's shoulder, thumb tucked in her mouth, eyes half-lidded. Flint rubbed his hands dry by the fire. Smells like you found the spice tin. I did, she said, not turning. And the salt crock. You hid it behind the flour. I don't like trusting the boys to measure it straight. They think more means better. She smiled faintly but didn't speak. After a moment, she shifted Opal to the cradle and pulled the pot from the flames. Sit, she said, gesturing with her chin. You've earned a hot plate. He didn't argue. The stew was thick, the sort that clung to a man's ribs. He ate without hurry, watching her as she moved around the room with quiet purpose. You ever think about remarrying? He asked, the question out before he could weigh it down. She glanced at him, then back to the hearth. Not until I ran, he swallowed. And now, I think about what kind of man would let a woman breathe right. She turned, met his eyes, not one who sees her as a ledger entry. He set the spoon down slow. You think I'm that kind? No, she said. If I did, I wouldn't be cooking in your house. The wind picked up outside, whistling through the eaves. Flint leaned back in the chair, thumb tracing the edge of the bowl. I don't expect you to stay, I know. But I want you to know you could. She didn't move, but something in her posture shifted, less guarded, more open. Flint, she said quietly, I've spent a long time waiting for someone to mean what they say. I don't say much, he replied. But I mean all of it. Their eyes held, and the room felt full, not with noise, but with something rooted, something that didn't need naming yet. That night, after the children had gone quiet and the fire burned low, Calla stepped outside. Flint stood near the corral, lantern in hand, checking the latch on the gate. She walked toward him, boots soft in the wet grass. You always check things twice, only when they matter. She stopped beside him. Rain clung to the air, but it had softened to a mist. I used to think I had to keep moving to stay safe, she said. And now, I think stillness might be its own kind of safety, if it's with the right person. He looked at her then, lantern light warming the curve of her cheek, the shift in her eyes. I've got land, a roof, and 2 good hands, he said. But I never had someone beside me who didn't look like they were planning their leave. I'm not planning anything, she said. He reached out, not quick but sure. His fingers barely brushed hers. She didn't pull away. And just like that, they stood together beneath the low sky, not speaking, not needing to. The kind of silence that didn't press, only held. It was a beginning. And it was real, The first letter arrived late in the day, handed off by a passing rider who tipped his hat and left without a word. Flint found it wedged beneath a flour sack on the porch bench when he came back from splitting fence rails. The handwriting on the front was tight and slanted. The ink faded like it had been penned in haste. He turned it over, brow furrowed. No return mark. Just his name and the county scratched in as though someone had paid half a mind to who might read it. Calla was in the back garden, coaxing Olivia and Otis through the careful tug of weeds from between the cabbage rows. Flint watched them a moment before stepping around the porch rail. "You know anyone sending word from Mason?" he asked. Calla straightened, brushing soil from her knees. "No," she said, but her voice tightened just slightly. "Why?" He held the letter out. She took it, lips parting as she read the front. Her hands stilled. Then she looked up. "It's from Vernon." Flint didn't ask how she knew. Her face said enough. She stepped onto the porch and opened it slow, unfolding the page like it might bite. Her eyes moved down the lines, and when she reached the end, she folded it twice and handed it back. "He's offering a reward," she said. "Says I'm unwell. Says he just wants me returned for my own good." Flint didn't speak. He didn't need to. "He wrote like he's trying to sound kind," she added, "but it reads like a trap." He tucked the letter into his back pocket. "I'll ride into town at first light. Let the marshal know no one's to come asking." "I don't want to fight," she said. "I'm not looking for one," Flint answered, "but I won't let him drag you back under a lie." Calla nodded once, jaw set. "He's got men and money. He could pay someone to look the other way." "He won't get far out here," Flint said. "Too many ridges, too many eyes that don't take to strangers." She stepped down to the last porch plank and looked out toward the hills. "Still, I won't let trouble find the children. They're safe," he said. "You all are." That night, she didn't go inside after the lamps were lit. Instead, she stayed out beneath the open sky, arms wrapped around herself, her shawl forgotten by the door. Flint joined her without speaking, standing close but not reaching. The moon hung low, pale as a bone. "Before my mother passed," Calla said, "she told me the truth about my birth, that I wasn't planned, that my father never forgave her for it." Flint kept his gaze forward. "She said I was the reason he stayed. And the reason he drank." "Your mother sounds like she carried too much alone," he said. "She did," Calla whispered. "And I swore I wouldn't do the same, but then I did. 4 times over." "You didn't do it alone," he said. "You held them, fed them. Kept them moving through things most grown men couldn't shoulder." Calla looked over. "And now you've got someone who'll shoulder it with you," he said. She dropped her eyes, but her voice came steady. "I never thought I'd trust a man again." "Not truly." "You don't have to rush that," Flint said. "Trust grows like anything worth keeping." She turned then, only slightly, enough that the lantern light caught the curve of her cheek. "You don't ask for anything," she said. "You just give." He met her gaze. "You've given more than you know." Wind stirred in the dry grass beyond the fence. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote yipped and fell quiet again. She reached out, slow, her fingers brushing against his. "I want to stay," she said. "Not just for safety, not just because I'm tired of running, but because when I wake here, I don't feel afraid." Flint lifted her hand and held it between his own, his touch rough but careful. "Then stay," he said. Inside, the children slept without stir. The fire burned low in the hearth, and the walls held firm against the dark. Out beneath the stars, Flint and Calla stood hand in hand, not speaking. They didn't need to. They'd already said everything that mattered. By the time summer pressed thick against the hills, the Hart children had taken to the rhythms of the land as though they'd been born to it. Owen helped Flint oil the harnesses each morning, hands steady and sure. Olivia gathered herbs with Calla and learned to grind them fine between 2 stones. Otis ran barefoot through the creek with a tin pail. always returning with one or two crawdads clamped tight to the rim. Opal, chubby-kneed and curious, had claimed the porch as her domain and spent long afternoons nesting wooden spoons in a wash basin. Calla stood at the stove this morning, shelling peas into a clay bowl, her hair pinned with less urgency than before. The tension that once sat just beneath her skin had softened. Flint noticed the difference in the way she moved, less like someone prepared to run, more like someone rooted. She turned when he came in from the yard, wiping her hands on her apron. "There's a letter from the marshal in town," she said. Left it on the bench. Flint picked it up, opened it with a fingernail. He scanned the page, then folded it in half. "Well?" she asked. "He says Vernon Baird left Mason, headed east, sold off his holdings. No one's seen him since." Calla leaned back against the counter. "So that's it. Marshall thinks he got word there was no help to be found this side of the county line." She exhaled, not relief exactly, more like the final breath after wading across deep water. "I thought I'd feel something," she said, "like I'd won. But mostly I just feel tired." "You've been holding a weight too long," Flint said. "Letting go don't always feel like joy. Sometimes it just feels quiet." She nodded, eyes on the floorboards. "I'd like to keep the children here if you mean what you said before." "I did. I could pay my way," she added. "I've been sewing at night. I've made a few things I could sell in town." Flint crossed the room, took the letter from her and set it aside. "You don't owe me wages, Calla." "I didn't take you in for coin." She looked up. "Then why did you?" He didn't rush his answer. "Because something in me knew the first time I saw you standing in that barn that you were meant to be here, not just passing through, meant to belong." She didn't look away. "I want to build a life that's quiet, not empty, just steady. I want that for them, for me." "You could have that here," Flint said, "if you want it with me." Calla stepped forward, slow. "You sure? I come with 4 shadows at my heels." "They're not shadows," he said. "They're yours. And I've grown fond of all of you." She reached for his hand, her grip warm and firm. "Then yes," she said. "Let's build it." They married beneath the pecan tree behind the house, where the breeze carried the scent of wild mint, and the chickens clucked like they were offering their own kind of blessing. Flint wore his only good shirt, sleeves rolled neat. Calla wore a dress she'd sewn from unbleached muslin, plain and soft, the hem stitched with a single line of blue thread. Owen stood beside Flint during the vows, tall and proud. Olivia carried a basket of violets. Otis tugged at his collar and whispered questions. Opal sat on Calla's hip, one hand tangled in her mother's hair, the other clutching a biscuit. Afterward, they ate peach preserves on cornbread and passed around a jug of cider. There was no preacher, just the sun warm on their backs and the quiet promise in their hands clasped tight. In the weeks that followed, Calla's sewing brought in a bit of coin, enough for cloth and sugar, and for a tin of paints Olivia used to brighten the shutters. Flint built a smokehouse with Owen's help, and together they salted meat for the winter. Otis found a kitten in the hayloft, and it followed him like a shadow. Opal learned to say "more" and "mama" in the same breath. One evening, long after the children were in bed, Calla and Flint sat on the back step, watching the fireflies blink above the pasture. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her hand resting over his. "I didn't think I'd ever trust peace," she said. "It felt like something that could be taken." "I won't let it be," he said. "Not while I've got breath." She was quiet a moment, then lifted her head and looked at him. "Do you think they'll remember this, the children?" "They will," he said. "They'll remember the steadiness of it, the meals, the laughter, the way you never let go even when it got hard. You gave us that too." I just held the door open. "You're the one who walked through." She smiled, her thumb brushing the back of his hand. "I love you, Flint." He turned to face her fully, eyes steady. "I love you, and I always will." They stayed like that until the stars burned high and the fields grew quiet. Years passed, and the house weathered silver. Owen left at 17 to apprentice with a cattleman near Uvalde. Olivia taught Sunday letters to the younger children in the valley. Otis took over the chicken coop and traded eggs for stories at the general store. Opal grew into a girl who could track a deer trail and braid her mother's hair by lamplight. Calla and Flint grew older side by side, never rushed, never loud, but always together. Their days were marked by the rhythm of work and the comfort of knowing each morning and every dusk they would rise and rest beside the other. And when they spoke, it was not in declarations, but in the language of shared bread, mended fences, and hands that reached without hesitation. What they built was not grand, but it was strong, and it lasted.